Welcome to Rebel Fantasy Football. Excited to have you guys. I'm your host, Jacob Stuckey. I hope you guys are having a great week. This is the week that you guys probably have most of your drafts. So good luck on that, and congrats to you guys that have already done your draft. I know that it's a lot of buildup going into your draft, and so once you're done with it, it's kind of like, what do I do next? It's that weird feeling of like, oh man, I'm excited for the season to start, but also kind of nervous to see how everything plays out. Well, I'm excited to get into the season. This is my last best of position video in my series, and so we're going to be going over quarterbacks today. Hopefully help you guys figure out which quarterback to prioritize. And then once the season starts, I'm excited to get into talking about waiver wire pickups, trades, who you guys should start or sit. So we have a lot of exciting stuff for the season, and I'm just really excited to get this channel fully going when the NFL season starts. So today we're going to be talking about quarterbacks, my top 16 quarterbacks. Now, one big note to make for this one is that I normally play in 6-point passing touchdown leagues. And that's what I'm going to be basing my rankings off of today. I know a lot of people still play in the 4-point passing touchdowns. I'm going to be making some notes in what I would do for those leagues. So if you do play in those leagues, don't feel like you can't watch this video, because I think it'll still be helpful. But there are some players that I have higher up in my rankings solely because of that 6-point passing touchdown rule. So, but I'll kind of make a note of that. For those that haven't played in the 6-point passing touchdown, I think it's really fun. I would honestly recommend switching your league over to that. The biggest problem with 4-point in my mind is that it really makes those guys that can score on the ground and that get a lot of rushing yards, it really makes them way more valuable than the guys that just sit in the pocket and pass. Almost to the point where I feel like it's not balanced. And so 6-point passing touchdowns in my mind makes it a little more balanced, because it still highly favors those guys that can run and score on the ground, but they also need to be able to throw. So the guys that just can score on the ground and can't throw, they're not going to get as many points as they would in a 4-point passing league. So just a couple things to note. But if you haven't tried 6-point, you should definitely try it, because I think it's a lot of fun. I think it makes it a lot more rewarding because your quarterbacks are getting a lot more points. And you guys probably also have like bonuses too. I know a couple of my leagues will have like bonuses for big yard games or for a big yard play. And so that also changes the field a lot too, because you'll often realize that with quarterbacks, the difference between basically each spot sometimes is pretty thin. It's pretty small. And so you could have the 5th ranked guy or the 6th ranked guy at the end of the year, they could be separated by like 15, 20 points. And so if you have a bonus, or if you have 6-point passing touchdown, that could instantly switch. So pay attention to your league settings. It's important to know what you're drafting into. And I always change my strategy based off my league and the settings. So let's get into it. Number one, no surprise, this one is pretty simple, is Josh Allen. I don't think there should be any debate here. I know I always thought it was crazy a couple years ago putting Josh Allen number one, but the last 2 years he's finished at number one, and he's just been a monster. He's been a monster through the air and through the ground, which for a lot of people is very surprising, that this guy who most people didn't think was a rusher actually is really dangerous on the ground, and you need to make sure that you're not allowing him to just run over you. And so Josh Allen finished number one last year, pretty much in all formats. even if you were in 4-point or 6-point. And he had over 4,000 yards, 4,400 yards, and 36 touchdowns passing, which is a lot. But he also had 763 yards rushing and 6 touchdowns. So he's like the sweet spot. He's the guy that you want because he excels through the air. And if you play in a 6-point league, he's going to get you a lot of points through the air. But he also has that extra edge on the ground, which is awesome. And so there's a reason why he's going number 1. I have him there as well. He's going pretty high in drafts, though. He's going like that early mid-second round. I'm more of the guy. I mean, I mentioned in my last video in my draft strategies that I like the value in late quarterbacks. I tend to wait for quarterbacks than drafting an early guy like a Josh Allen or a Patrick Mahomes. But I would say if you really want to lock in your quarterback and if you want Josh Allen, you're going to have to pay for it. But if you're okay with that, you're probably just kind of have to sacrifice on a tight end. You're probably not going to be able to get an early quarterback and an early tight end because you're going to be hurting at running back and wide receiver, which I would not recommend. But if you do go for Josh Allen, there's definitely a lot of valuable tight ends that you can get later on as well. All right, number 2, I have Patrick Mahomes. Not everyone has Patrick Mahomes at this spot. Some people have him at 3. I still really like him, even though Tyreek Hill isn't there anymore. It's hard to doubt Patrick Mahomes. I still think he's probably the best quarterback in the league. Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. Their playoff game last year was insane. I'm hoping to see more of that stuff this year. But even though for many people's standards, Patrick Mahomes had a down year last year, he still did really well, which I think is a testament to how great of a player he is. He almost had 5,000 yards last year, and he had 37 touchdowns. The thing with him that you're not really going to get is that rushing ability. I mean, he did get 380 yards on the ground and 2 touchdowns, but a lot of other people get that as well. But because of how dangerous he is in the pocket and how, dangerous he is as a quarterback, he's a guy that's hard to ignore, and he's a guy that I think you should still draft with confidence. I don't think you should be scared of Patrick Mahomes just because Tyreek Hill left. I really like Juju Smith-Schuster that they now have on the Chiefs, and that he still has Kelsey. And so I'm looking for him to do really well this year as well. So I would definitely take him at 2. I don't know. He's another guy where, because of my philosophy with drafting, I don't know if I'll necessarily reach for him most of the time in my leagues. But if you are wanting a quarterback, I would definitely go for Patrick Mahomes at number 2. I think he's going to do well. Number 3, Justin Herbert. So some people have Justin Herbert at 2 instead of Patrick Mahomes. They just flip it. And I don't mind that because I really like Herbert. I think he has a chance. I think he has a chance to be number 1. Obviously, anything can happen. Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes can have down years, and Herbert can have an amazing year. But I think top 3, I feel really secure about. But he's another guy that is a monster, and he doesn't really get much rushing yards either. His stat line to Patrick Mahomes is very similar in regards to the ground. But he had 5,000 yards passing and 38 touchdowns. I think his touchdowns can increase, which is crazy to say because 38 is a lot. But I think with all the weapons that he has on the Chargers and his second year under Brandon Staley, I think this team will do really well this year. And I really like Herbert. And so if Herbert's a guy that you can get cheaper than Patrick Mahomes, if you can get him later, I would take that shot for sure. Because I think he has the chance and the opportunity to finish top 3. And who knows? Who knows what's going to happen this year? All right. Number 4, I have Lamar Jackson. I really like Lamar. I think he is a great quarterback. I think he's efficient and dangerous in both aspects, rushing, obviously, and passing. A lot of people don't like his passing. but I think he did improve last year. He was battling with some injuries, so he didn't play the full year. But I think in what he did last year, like even though he didn't finish a full season, I think is it pretty impressive. And the fact that he is a runner, like he's a true dangerous runner, I think is a reason to take him as well. He helps you get that edge. I think especially in 4-point, you're going to want to take him early, but I would also take him early in 6-point as well. And so, yeah, I'm excited for this team. Mark Andrews, I think is going to do really well again. And a lot of people, I think, may not put Lamar at number 4, mainly because of the wide receivers that he has left. He doesn't have Hollywood Brown anymore. And so he's having to throw to Devin Duvernay and James Prochet and Rashad Bateman. But I like those guys. I think similar to Aaron Rodgers, I think Lamar will find a way to work with the receivers that he has in his room. And he's just a talent that like you can't really ignore. But I feel comfortable with him at 4. If people take other quarterbacks ahead of him and leave him there, I may take him in the middle rounds. I don't know how high I would take him, but I like Lamar a lot this year. I think he's going to do well. So this is my top 4. I feel confident in this top 4, regardless of the format, 4-point, 6-point. But now it's going to get a little bit spicy. Actually, it's going to get really spicy. So here we go. So number 5, I have Kirk Cousins. Woo! Kirk Cousins. Yeah, it's crazy. I know. I'm not saying that I would draft him as the 5th quarterback on the board. That is not what I'm saying. I'm saying that I think he can finish as the 5th best quarterback at the end of the year in 6-point passing touchdown leagues. I don't think he'll finish 5th and 4-point. But the reason why I think he can finish as the 5th best quarterback this year has to do with my wide receiver list. If you watched my first episode, I went over my top 16 wide receivers. And in that episode, I listed Justin Jefferson as number 1. I listed him as having the ability to finish as the best wide receiver at the end of the season. Now, if he's going to do that, I believe that Kirk Cousins has to be able to pull that weight. I think Kirk Cousins has to be able to give him the ball, and I think he has to do better than he did last year and that he has done. But the thing that everyone like forgets about and doesn't realize is that the past 2 seasons, Kirk Cousins has finished inside the top 10. Obviously, depending on your league, some leagues he's finished at 11. In my league, for 6-point, he's finished at 9. And people don't really realize that he's being drafted as the 13th best quarterback. So he's being drafted as the 13th best quarterback by most people. I have him at 5 because I think that with the weapons that he has on his team, Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, KJ Osborne, Dalvin Cook, Irv Smith, I think he's going to excel. And I think he's going to have more touchdowns than he did last year. If you look at how he did last year, he had 4,200 passing yards and 33 touchdowns. Obviously, he is not a rusher, so he only had 115 rushing yards and 1 rushing touchdown. But he only had 33 touchdowns, and he still finished inside the top 10. And I think that number is just going to go up. I see him getting over 40 touchdowns this year. I think Justin Jefferson is finished as the best wide receiver. And I think with that, Kirk Cousins has to continue slinging the ball. And I think they're going to score more. If you look at a lot of their games last year, they lost in really close fashion. I think with this new offense, with a new head coach and new offensive schemes, I think that's going to help them get over the hump. I think they're going to be able to have an edge in those games, those close games. And I'm looking for Kirk to score more. And so it's a hot take. what does that mean in regards to drafting? What does that mean? Like, how am I drafting? You may be asking. Well, I'm obviously looking for these top 4 guys: Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Herbert, Jackson. Depending on where they fall in my draft, um, I would take them. Like, obviously, depending on the other guys that get taken, if there's a wide receiver I really want at a certain point in my draft, but he gets taken ahead of me, and I have a quarterback like a Herbert or a Jackson that fall to me, I'll take him for sure. It just obviously depends on the people that the best player available and who are my options at that point. But if those 4 guys are gone, and I feel like there's a lot of value left in the wide receiver or running back position, I'm okay waiting for a quarterback. I'm okay waiting for Kirk Cousins, because Kirk Cousins is getting drafted in like the 10th, 11th round in most 12-man drafts. And so if I can get a Kirk Cousins who I think that can finish top 5 at the end of the year, if I can get him late in my draft, yeah, I'll take that. Like, that to me is money. Like, that's easy. Now, obviously anything can happen. I know this is a hot take, and so I need to be willing to eat my words if I'm wrong, and I'm okay with that. But I think the thing with my philosophy with quarterbacks is that even if Kirk Cousins doesn't finish top 5, say he doesn't have a great year, say he struggles, there are still guys that you can pick up on the waiver wire, and there are still like backup quarterbacks that you can take late in your draft. They can bridge that gap. They can bridge that gap between kind of the like top 10 quarterbacks and a quarterback on the waiver wire. The difference between later quarterbacks, like if you're outside those top 4 guys, I think the difference is very marginal between the rest of the quarterbacks. If you look at what some people did last year, myself included, is that I utilized this strategy last year in several of my drafts. I said, okay, I'm going to wait for a quarterback, and I'm going to prioritize running backs, wide receivers. And I ended up drafting Tom Brady in the 9th round last year. Tom Brady in some leagues finished as the 2nd best quarterback last year. And so that was the best case scenario for my team. I got a lot of value in quarterback. I got a top 2 guy in the 9th round, and I was able to get top running backs, top wide receivers, instead of sacrificing on that value. And so that's what I look for. That's what I tried to do. When I draft quarterbacks, obviously I'm not going to hit every time. But Kirk Cousins is a guy that I'm looking for late in my drafts. I'm not going to take him in every league, but I'm comfortable taking him as my starting quarterback with his high ceiling this year. And that's how I see it. Next up, we got Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow is another guy that I think has a very high ceiling, and I think he's going to have a really good year. The thing with Joe Burrow that kind of bothers me a little bit is that I'm a little worried about his touchdowns. Last year, he had 34 touchdowns. And so similar to Kirk Cousins, he didn't get as many touchdowns as we expected. And for a guy that has one of the top wide receivers in the league, just like Kirk, but he throws it a lot. And he's not a rusher. He only had 2 rushing touchdowns on goal line stands, obviously. But he had 4,600 passing yards, and he had 520 attempts, which is actually not that many. If you look at some of the attempts of the other guys, he definitely has like probably, yeah, I'm just looking through the list, and he actually has probably one of the least amount of throws. And I think part of that is because he goes for these big yard plays. He'll throw to Jamar Chase for like 60, 70 yards, and that'll be it. That'll be the game. And so I like Joe Burrow again this year. He's going to be throwing to Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd. I like Hayden Hurst. Obviously, I've shared that a lot. And so he's got the weapons. And with what they did last year, picked it up late in the season. They made the Super Bowl. I look for that to continue. I don't think that they'll be as dominant as they were near the end of the season last year. But I like top 6 for Joe Burrow. I think he definitely can and will finish inside the top 10 for quarterbacks at the end of the season, specifically for 6-point passing touchdown leagues. I think he can for 4 as well, but I see him finishing. I feel like top 6 is his ceiling, to be honest. But I think inside the top 10 is definitely his floor. It's kind of how I see him. I would feel comfortable taking him depending on where he drops in drafts. But I like him this year. Number 7, I have Dak Prescott. This one was a little tricky for me. I think mainly because his wide receivers, from what we've seen with reports, a lot of them are hurt. You got Michael Gallup that's kind of still battling injury. James Washington got hurt during preseason. CeeDee Lamb was kind of battling something during training camp. Sounds like he's okay, but if CeeDee Lamb were to get hurt, this could definitely affect Dak because he's not going to have a ton of other guys to throw to. Now, I think guys can definitely step up. I really like Tolbert as a rookie. I know that he hasn't been playing great during training camp or preseason, but I think he can pick it up and do really well. They still have Dalton Schultz, who I still think is a solid tight end, and I think Dak's going to look to him a lot as well. Now, kind of near the later ends of Dak's career, he's not as much of a rusher as he used to be. Last year, he only had 146 rushing yards and 1 rushing touchdown. But the dude throws it. The dude slings it. He had almost 4,500 yards and 37 touchdowns. And that's for a team that has one of the best offenses in the league, but they still underperform. And so for a guy that's on a team that often underperforms, he still does really well. And it's hard not to take him here. He almost had 40 passing touchdowns last year. I know they don't have Amari Cooper anymore, but Amari still kind of struggled last year anyways. And I think they still have some guys on their team that can catch the ball. I think a lot of it is going to come down to their offensive line and how Zeke and Pollard does. Because if they put Pollard in the slot like they're talking about, and Pollard does really well as a pass catcher, that's just going to help Zeke and Dak so much more. And so I feel pretty good with Dak at this spot. I would probably bump him back a couple if it was 4-point, but I like him for 6-point here. Next up is Kyler Murray. So this is a guy that obviously I've dropped in my rankings. A lot of people have Kyler as top 5. I think for 4-point, you can make that argument having him top 5. He has that rushing potential that makes him so dangerous and makes him so good as a fantasy quarterback. I don't think that he's going to do as well on the ground as he did a couple years ago. Last season, he did get injured, so he rushed less. He missed a couple games, but he also did rush less when he came back, mainly because I believe it was an ankle injury. But he had 423 yards on the ground last year and 5 touchdowns, which if you add that to your game, that's just going to boost you so much more. But especially in 4-point, that's just really dangerous. He had almost 4,000 yards passing and he had 24 touchdowns. Big reason why those numbers are low is because he did miss a couple of games. But the year before, I believe he had 10 rushing touchdowns, which is awesome. And that's the guy that you kind of want to look for to draft. Reasons why I'm not so high on him this year. DeAndre Hopkins is suspended the first 6 games of the season. I think Marquise Brown is good, but I don't think he's D-Hop good. I like Ertz. I don't think he's D-Hop good either. And so if you're going to have Ertz and Brown as your top 2 targets, you're going to have to really be on your game from a quarterback perspective. I think Kyler is a good quarterback. I don't think he is as consistent as some of these other guys. I think he has a high ceiling. That's why people like drafting him early. That's why they like prioritizing him, is because he has a high ceiling. I just am worried about him. I don't feel as confident drafting him, especially in 6-point passing. If it was 4-point, you're taking him just because of the rushing. That's why you're taking him. but I don't foresee him having a ton of rushing yards or touchdowns. I don't think he's going to have 10 again this year. Obviously, if he does, that's awesome, but I just don't see that happening. I think it's gonna start to play out kind of like Russell Wilson. I think Kyler is gonna be more back in the pocket. I think he's not gonna run as much. Russell would run all the time early on in his career, and then once he kind of got some injuries, he was like, okay, I need to chill it down a little bit. I think that's gonna be the same with Kyler. He's kind of getting to that point in his career. I think he can still be dangerous on the ground, but I don't think he's going to lean on it as much. So it's a tough spot. That's why I have him at 8. But honestly, after the top 4, you can kind of flip flop any of these guys. These rankings were actually really hard for me to put together. I kept going back and forth, but that's where I have him for 6 point. Is the 8 spot. Number 9, I have Tom Brady. I wanted to put Tom Brady outside the top 10, but it was really hard. It was really hard to do that. I thought about it and I was like, okay, for a guy that finished as the second best quarterback in some leagues last year, I have to put him inside the top 10. And I think you're still taking him solely because of the weapons that he has on the Bucks, and also the fact that it's Tom Brady. I know that there are some questions regarding is he going to play the full season, based off the rumors about why did he step away for 2 weeks, and is he truly focused on the game? I think Tom Brady wants to win, and I know that for a fantasy perspective, that's great. That's kind of all I gotta say for that. I mean, all you gotta know is that Tom Brady, I don't think he's gonna quit in the middle of the season just because that's not Tom Brady. And like we saw with him coming out of retirement, he still loves the game. He still wants to be there. He still wants to compete. And I think he has the team to compete. Mike Evans is a top 10 wide receiver. Chris Godwin, if he gets back to speed and gets on the field fast, that's only going to help Tom Brady. He still has Russell Gage. Leonard Fournette is now going to be their lead back. So they have the weapons to do it, and Tom still has the arm to do it. I don't think he's going to have the season that he had last year, which is why I have him at 9 and not higher. He had 5,300 passing yards last year, which is crazy. Most amount of passing yards, most amount of yards in a season in his career, and attempts as well. He threw it 700 times, and he had 43 touchdowns. And so for 6 point, he was amazing because he had 43 touchdowns, which is a lot. I still see him scoring touchdowns, a lot of touchdowns through the air, but I definitely don't think he's going to have 43. He's definitely not going to have as many yards as he did last year. I mean, I can't say definitely, but I don't think that he's going to. But it's hard to doubt him. It's hard to doubt him. Number 10, I have Jalen Hurts. This is another guy that a lot of people have higher. I've seen some other people's rankings where they have Hurts and Kyler inside the top 5, or Hurts at number 6, so a little bit outside of top 5. I do like Hurts, and I know I have him at 10, which is hard for me to do because I do like him. I think he has a lot of potential. I would say that 10's probably a good floor. I think he does have a higher ceiling. I just don't feel as confident. Big reason for that is because he had so many rushing touchdowns last year. And I don't think he's going to repeat that. I think he is going to do better in the air. There's a lot of positive reports about him during the summer. And he has AJ Brown now. He still has Devonta Smith. I think he's going to do a lot better in the air than he did last year. If you look at his stats, he only had 700, looking at the wrong one. He had 784 rushing yards, which is a lot. I thought I was reading passing yards, so I was like, nope, that is not what I was reading. But he had 10 rushing touchdowns, which is crazy, and I don't think he's going to repeat that this year. But if you look at his yards, he only had 3,100 passing yards, and he had 16 passing touchdowns. Now he did miss a couple of games, and I think he's going to do way better than 16 passing touchdowns. but I don't think he's going to repeat the 10 rushing touchdowns. I think he can still get a similar amount of rushing yardage, and I think he still is dangerous on the ground. I don't think he's at that stage yet, like Russell or Kyler, where they probably will have to slow down a little bit. I think he still is very mobile and dangerous. But I don't like him for completing 10 rushing touchdowns again. And I don't see him throwing close to 40 passing touchdowns either. So that's why I have him at 10. I think if you're in 4-point, you're going to take him a little higher, mainly because of his rushing ability and potential. But I think you still need to temper your expectations with the amount of rushing touchdowns he's going to get. I just don't. If you look at what happened with Kyler, I know he got hurt, but he wasn't rushing for that many touchdowns last year. I think that's a hard thing to repeat. And I think they relied on him on the ground solely because they had to last year. But I think with the running backs that they have and the system that they're trying to repeat this year, I see them relying more on those running backs rather than Hurts. But you never know. All right, 11, I have Stafford. A lot of people have Stafford at 12 or 13, which is hard. It's hard to do. I want to put him higher, but I feel like I can't, solely because of the high ceiling and high potential that a lot of these earlier guys have. Reason why I have Stafford at 11 is because he still is throwing to Cooper Kupp. He now has Allen Robinson on his team, which I think is just going to fully boost him. I still see Cooper Kupp as a top 2 wide receiver in this league. I see him finishing inside the top 3 for fantasy. I think Stafford isn't going to have as many touchdowns as he did last year. If you look at how many touchdowns he had 41, which was a lot. He was just slinging that ball. I think he's probably going to have around 33, 35, probably early 30s for passing touchdowns. He had almost 5,000 passing yards, which I don't think he will do either. I probably see him doing 4,500. And so, yeah, but those are still top 10 numbers. I mean, if we look at what Kirk Cousins did, like I talked about, like he had early 30s passing touchdowns and he still finished inside the top 10 for a lot of leagues. I see Stafford flirting with top 10 numbers. I can see him finishing inside. I think that's a possibility. But I think 11 is kind of where I feel comfortable with him. But if you look at what he did last year, which I think is another case for why I was talking about Kirk Cousins, is that he finished as the 5th best quarterback last year. And a big part of that was because of how well Cooper Kupp finished. And so if you have a guy like Justin Jefferson that I was saying that is going to finish number 1, I feel like top 5 for Kirk is definitely a good possibility, mainly because of what we saw Matthew Stafford do, which is why it's encouraging and why I call my shot with Kirk Cousins is mainly because of the path that Stafford set last year. And so that's kind of where I see him. I want to take him higher, but these guys, like all of these guys are so good that my rankings they can easily flip-flop. And obviously once the season starts, we'll see where my rankings change and whatnot. But that's where I have Stafford. And that's kind of where I'm having my rankings go before the season starts. So next up, we have Aaron Rodgers. This is another one that was hard. Like I wanted to put Rodgers higher, but main reason why I have him at 12 is because of Devontae Adams leaving. Rodgers has a big lack of weapons right now. He has Lazard as his number 1 wide receiver, which is hard, I think, from a fan perspective to put your faith and hope in him. Like it's hard to put confidence in Lazard performing like Devontae Adams. Now, obviously, he's not going to be near Adams, but I think Lazard can still do well. I think Rodgers can still do well. I think a top 10 finish is definitely a high possibility. I was looking at Rodgers' stats, and I don't think he's ever finished outside of the top 10 for fantasy when he's played a full season, which is scary. It's scary to doubt him. I don't like doubting him because he thrives on that and he proves everyone wrong. And so the fact that most people have him outside the top 10, myself included, is a little scary. But for you guys, I would say capitalize on that. If Aaron Rodgers falls to you really late, if you can get him in the 9th round, he could be like the Tom Brady of last year. We know who he is. We know how good of a player he is. And so if he's falling in fantasy drafts solely because we're unsure about his wide receivers, he could prove us wrong. Those wide receivers can go off and Rodgers can have a top 3 year. Now that's a scenario that is a possibility. It may not be a high possibility, but it is a chance. And so if you want to take your shot on that, if you would rather prioritize other guys early in your drafts and go get an Aaron Rodgers late in the 8th or 9th round, go for it. That could be a steal. I like him a lot. I like looking for him in my drafts. If he falls to me during those rounds, I'm probably going to take him. I know a lot of people like taking him as well, especially my buddies. They're looking for him too. But if he falls to you and your league mates aren't prioritizing him, I would take him. I think that's a steal for sure. Next up at 13, I have Russell Wilson. Another one that was hard for me to do. I'm a Seahawks fan. I still like Russell. It hurts that he's not on the Seahawks. I still like him though. The reason why I have him at 13 is because I don't trust his wide receivers. A lot of people have Cortland Sutton as being a sleeper this year. They have him as being able to be a top 15, top 10 guy. And I like Sutton. I liked him last year. I was taking him as a sleeper going in my drafts last year. But I don't think he's a DK Metcalf. I don't think Judy is a Tyler Lockett. I like Russell. I think he's still a good quarterback. I think he's still going to do well. I think he can finish inside the top 10, but I don't see him going farther than that. I like him at the 13th spot. I see him finishing a little bit outside the top 10. He's not a rusher as he used to be. He can still throw it for sure. I think he's still accurate, but I don't have faith in his wide receivers as much as I did when he was with the Seahawks. And even when he was with the Seahawks, he still had issues with DK and Lockett. He still had issues in that passing game. Now we'll see if that philosophy changes in Denver. Maybe they'll let him cook this year. I don't know. Maybe it'll be a more aerial attack, how we saw him start Seahawks a couple years ago. But I do like Russell. I just have a hard time putting him ahead of these other guys. I have a hard time saying, okay, let's take Russell ahead of Rodgers or Stafford or Brady. Like those guys tend to throw it for a lot more than Russell. And I think with the rushing attack that Denver has, they're going to want to lean into that too. They're not going to let Russell throw it all day because they still have 2 good running backs in Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon. So it's a hard one. A lot of people have Russell a little higher than this, but unfortunately, that's kind of where I had to put him with how my list played out. All right, next up, I got Trey Lance. Now, if you're in 4-point passing touchdowns leagues, you may put Trey Lance a little higher because of his rushing ability. I think he's going to do well this year. I think he has a lot of potential. He has a lot of big-time weapons. Deebo Samuel, George Kittle. You still got Brandon Ayuk if he gets his stuff together and figures it out. But I think Trey Lance has a high ceiling as well. I like him at 14. I think that's a good spot, especially for a guy first year fully starting on his team. I think he has top 10 potential, but I don't feel as confident with that. I like him finishing inside the top 15 though, for sure. But 14 is kind of where I feel comfortable with him. All right, next up, I got Carr. I got Derek Carr. Some analysts, they have Carr a lot higher. I think he's another guy you can call your shot on. He now has Devontae Adams, one of the best wide receivers in the league, which I think will boost Carr's value for sure. But if you look at where he's finished the past several years, he struggled to finish as a top guy. I think most of the time he's finished inside the top 20, but I don't think he's ever finished inside the top 10 yet. And so I do like Carr. I think 15 may be a little bit low for him, but I have a hard time putting him ahead of Russell or putting him ahead of Rodgers or Stafford or Hurts. Like I can't do that. I think he could finish there. I think he has a chance to. But I like him at 15. I think that's probably a good spot for him. I think he can definitely finish a little bit outside of 10. I think 11 or 12, but I don't really see him finishing inside of the top 10. I think that he is a good quarterback, but I don't think he's an Aaron Rodgers. I don't think he's anywhere close, to be honest. So, yeah, we'll see. I'm excited to see how he does. I'm rooting for him. I want him to do well, but I have him at 15. I think that's a good spot. All right, last up is Tua. I feel good about 16 for Tua. I don't think I would have him any higher, and I don't think I'll have him anything less. I think with Tyreek Hill, that similar to Carr, that boosts his value. Like when you get a top wide receiver on your team, that's automatically going to make you have a lot more potential. Now we'll see what he does with it. We'll see how the connection with Tyreek plays off. But I do like Tua. I haven't always liked him. I've been fairly low on him. I was one of those guys rooting for Fitzpatrick when they had that kind of QB timeshare. But I think I've liked how Tua has handled his business recently and stood up for his deep ball and kind of defended himself in that way to the media. Now we'll see. We'll see how his deep ball does with Tyreek. There was some cool plays going on during the preseason games where he was showing that flash. And so if he develops that deep ball with Tyreek, I think he can be really dangerous. I think he's a value. He's definitely going as the last guy on this list. And so if you get him in the 12th or 13th round of your leagues near the end of your drafts, he could be a steal. He's probably not going to be a guy that you're super comfortable with. You're not going to be super confident. But he could be a guy that'd be like, all right, I'm going to call my shot with him and hope that he does really well. So, but that's where I have him. I have him at 16. So let's go over the list. Number 1, Josh Allen. I have Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson. My spicy pick at number 5, Kirk Cousins. Joe Burrow at number 6, Dak Prescott, Kyler Murray. At 9, I had Tom Brady. Jalen Hurts was next, Matthew Stafford, Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson at 13, Trey Lance, Derek Carr, and Tua at 16. So this is my list for 6-point passing touchdown leagues. If I was playing for a couple of the guys I would switch, I would put Kyler and Hurts higher automatically. I would probably put Trey Lance a little higher as well. I would put Russell probably a little bit higher just because I think he still can run a little bit. But those guys that can get rushing yards and rushing touchdowns at a 4-point, you're going to prioritize a little more in a lot more in 4-point. It's kind of how it plays out. So if you're looking at other people's rankings, they're probably going off of 4-point, which is why they would have Kyler and Hurts higher. I don't know if I would take them top 5, but I would take them closer to 5. I would take them outside of top 6, maybe 6 or 8 for Kyler and Hurts. So yeah, that's my rankings, my quarterback rankings. Excited to finish this best of position series, and I'm hoping that this will help you guys out for your drafts. Let me know if you have any questions. Let me know if you disagree with me on Kirk Cousins or whatever it is. But yeah, I hope you guys are having a good week. I hope your drafts are going well and your preparation for those drafts. So let me know if you have any questions. I'm excited to get the season started. And yeah, stay tuned. I'm going to be helping you guys stay up to date with your drafts and stay up to date with your leagues and the players, and hopefully help you guys get a fantasy football championship this year. So we'll catch you guys next time, and I hope you guys have a good one.